Her last note may have said something like this: "Goodbye, Anderson. The meatloaf should be good for a couple more days yet." Or simply, "You will remember to feed Copenhagen, won't you?" No question mark after the U. Meredith Henry did not like question marks. Or even, "Our marriage has reached a state of maximal entropy, and you never did make the maple syrup like you promised. Yours once, but not anymore, Mare." Okay, it is highly improbable Mrs. Henry would have written about maximal entropy in her goodbye note. She didn't really ever talk like that, at least not when I was around. To me, she would post cryptic, pass-ag notes like, "Good day, Terry. I enjoy the sporty look on you, but wearing a belt could really help to flatter your boyish figure. Could you please ask your son to watch his speed? Thanks." My 13-year-old, Ryder, is something of a speed demon and once careered straight into Meredith outside her home one afternoon, or outside Entropy Central, which Rye later took to calling the Henrys' house. "What on earth do you mean by that?" I asked him. "Just take a look over the fence," Ryder replied. It seemed to be the boiling part of the sap-to-syrup procedure which was causing Anderson the most trouble. My son told him that you have to heat it up outside or you'll just end up with a sweat lodge for a kitchen. Almost every single day, even on New Year's Day, he was out there in his back garden attempting to build a fire. Ryder and I asked him if he wanted any help with this, but he just replied, "No thank you, folks. I got it." Mr. Henry hadn't got it at all and couldn't even stay awake long enough to stop the liquid from burning. That was the first time we really saw him lose his temper, too. It was as if all the life was gradually being siphoned out of him. I didn't cry, though. Absolutely not. I quit crying long ago. And I swore that if he hadn't got it together by Valentine's Day, I would just have to wish for some kind of devilish little leprechaun to come along and sort things out. "Welcome to the neighbourhood, ma'am," Anderson called out in a voice that sounded surprisingly young for 74. This was the first thing he said to me when Ryder and I moved to this area almost 7 years ago. "I'll bring you and the little newt a batch of New Hampshire's finest Henry syrup next spring." Anderson coined the nickname Little Newt for my son that day because he was small, wriggly, and curiously cool-blooded. The shape of him may have shifted since then, of course, but Ryder has retained that chilly, amphibious-like touch. Just as Mr. Henry said this about Rye, I caught my first glimpse of Anderson's wife when she opened the front door and stepped onto their porch. She was wearing a tangerine-coloured, wide-brimmed hat, and the angle at which she'd placed it on her head meant that I could only see her right eye. This eye seemed to be watching Ryder and me intently. She didn't come over to say hello, but instead stood for a moment longer before going back inside. How strange, I thought. So unneighbourly compared to her husband. "Thank you," I said to Mr. Henry. "We'll look forward to it." "You won't be disappointed. Is that a British accent I hear?" I smiled and nodded. Mum and I swapped Old Manchester for New Manchester when I was a teenager, and, well, Ryder was born just a few years later. "Afraid so." "Nothing to be afraid of here, ma'am," he said, winking at Ryder. "Now, let me ask you something, little newt." Anderson eased himself down to my son's height with such supernatural grace that I wondered whether he might have been a ballet dancer in his earlier days, rather than, as I learned later, a post office clerk. Do I know why they're called silver maples?" Ryder interrupted, mimicking my English accent. Mr. Henry looked at my son aghast. "Well, yes, that was going to be my question, but how could you have possibly known I was going to ask you that?" Before we split up, his father and I used to joke that our boy may not be 100% human and could actually be from the planet Orc. "I just knew," Ryder said, grinning and returning to his native New England voice. During this time, his teeth were growing at alternate speeds, and the top row looked like one side of a jigsaw puzzle piece. "It's because the bottom of the leaves are silver." "That's right," Anderson said, straightening himself up, one silken vertebrae at a time, and gazing at me with his lichen green eyes. "You've got yourself a bright boy here, ma'am." "Yes," I said. as Mr. Henry began to mock fight with my son like they were twin brothers inside a playpen. Can be quite hard keeping up with him sometimes, that's for sure. I was looking forward to that batch of syrup, but it never came, nor the next spring or the spring after that. Poor Anderson just couldn't seem to get it right. His entropy kept going up and up and up, and then his wife walked out and left him for a man 12 years her junior, and there was nothing but more disorder all around him. Also, I thought until I caught him by the lake last Halloween, tapping one of the silver maples with his small wooden peg. I bet Anderson had been talking it over with Copenhagen and saying things like, "I'll make the syrup, and then she'll come back to us. Don't you worry your pretty little fins anymore, Copen. Order will soon be restored." But this didn't seem at all possible. Anderson was getting more and more frail. His syrup making was chaotic and utterly disorganized. Never mind Entropy Central, Mr. Henry was living in Entropy City. "Maybe it could be decreased," my son interrupted. He was lying face down on our carpet, enveloped in the fabric of his new red sweatshirt. "What was that, Ryder? Been reading my mind again, have you? Just how many of my thoughts did you actually intercept this time?" "I got the one where you call Mrs. Henry a pass hag." "I did not say or think pass hag. I said pass ag. It means passive aggressive." "Mom, I know what it means. I'm no dummy." "Please don't use that term, Ryder," I said. "And what exactly do you mean, maybe it could be decreased?" "Old Dude Anderson's entropy," Ryder said as he rolled over onto his back and peered up at me with his fizzy cola brown eyes. "You don't know about the demon?" "What demon?" I asked. "You're the only gremlin around here, young man." Ryder let out a heavy sigh and stole a sideways look at his phone. "Maxwell's demon. He was able to sort shit," language please. "Sorry, I mean sort stuff out." "Not sure I understand what you mean, honey," I said. "What sort of stuff exactly?" Checking his phone once again for messages, Ryder said, "I gotta meet Jaden at the pool in like a half hour." "Have you finished your homework?" He shrugged as if to say, "Duh, I did it in like 30 seconds. "Well, just give your old mum 5 minutes at least. I'd like to hear about this demon." Another long exhalation of breath before my son at last began to enlighten me. "So there was this Scottish dude in the 1860s or whatever, and he came up with his theory. He wanted to know if it was possible to violate the second law of thermodynamics." My mind shut down completely for a moment. "Yes," I said finally, "I know that law, of course I do. Heat can only flow from a hot to a cold body, and never the other way around." He was staring at me, waiting for more. "And entropy, disorder, always increases in the end." While Ryder considered my energetic reply, he wiped his nose with the sleeve of his new sweater. "You sure about that, Mom?" he asked, inspecting the impressive assortment of snot. "Use a handkerchief next time, Ryder, please. And yes, I am sure." I was not at all sure. Ryder knew that I wasn't either. "But if you've got a demon that can, get in there with the molecules and, infiltrate the system, then order might be restored." I still did not understand. But how? How would a demon, a mythical, non-human being, be able to do such a thing? Ryder swept his thumb left to right across the screen of his phone. "If I just tell you this one more thing, can I go?" I nodded, yes. "Say you have a container of gas with 2 parts. Let's call one part Ged and the other Ken." "Wait, don't you mean Jed and Ken?" "No, Mom, just go with it, Ged and Ken. Or you can say it all together, Gedanken. It's a German word, and it means thinking or thought or something." He's teaching himself German now? Or did Rye just wake up this morning fluent in another language? "I understand," I said, lying. Gedanken. I repeated this word over and over. "So in this container in there are like gazillions and gazillions of gas molecules, Some are fast and some are slow, and what this demon wants to do is sort out the molecules so that all the slow ones are in Ged and all the faster in Can. And to do this, he uses a... Whoa, just a minute, Ryan. He was talking at such a rapid pace, I couldn't keep up. Just hold fast on those story molecules of yours for a second, please. Okay, Mom, I will try to. Ryder, I warned him. Any more of that sarcastic tone and you will not be going swimming at all. He may be smart, but I was still the boss around here. My son's side brought the hood of his Hades red sweater up over his head and finally began again. The demon has this trap door that only he can open. He knows when a fast molecule is getting close to the door, so when it does, he opens it and it shoots through to Ged, and vice versa for the slow ones getting through to Can. A gas's temperature is only an average speed of its molecules, right, Mom? Yes, yeah, you are absolutely right, Ryder. Right, so even a hot gas has some lazy asses letting the side down, and even a cold gas has a few speedballs. The demon would let these off-the-wall kinds of molecules through to the other side, which would mean the temperature difference between them would get even greater. Kaboom! That is it. The demon has just busted the second law of thermodynamics and caused heat to flow from a cold body to a hot one. Ryder's soda-popping eyes bore right through to mine. Hasn't he? Hasn't he? Why did I feel as if I was under surveillance right now from my own son? Was this a trick question? Yes, I said. Or at least I think he has. Yeah, I guess. Maybe he has. Maybe, but I thought you just said... Maybe he has and maybe he hasn't. Just think about it, Mom. Look, I gotta go, Ryder said, sliding up onto his feet. But you know, if he has, then maybe Mr. Henry's ever-increasing entropy can be reduced, decreased. Do you understand what I am? Okay, that's enough, I said. You're free to go and be back by 10:30. I called out to him, but he had already slithered away.